Why Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce shouldn't be judged too heavily until he actually has the roster in place he needs to be able to compete. That plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for October 30th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day, whether you're checking us out on YouTube or you're checking us out wherever you get your favorite podcast. We definitely appreciate that. The show continues to grow both ways, right? People ask me all the time, does it matter if I watch on YouTube or listen by audio version on the podcast? It doesn't matter. As long as you're supporting the show one way, one how, we appreciate that. Of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, shout out to my man Ari. He makes sure we're up on YouTube each and every day, making sure we're looking good and sounding good. So shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. We'll close out the show with your calls and texts like we normally do. Again, a lot of feedback that we've gotten already throughout the course of the week, so we'll make sure we get to as much as possible. That'll come up as we close out the show. Before that, though, definitely want to talk about head coach Antonio Pierce, what he's working with as far as the Raiders roster, something that we touched on Tuesday's show, where they need to go as far as the Raiders roster goes, and why he should be the guy that's judged after that is actually put in place. We'll do that also on today's show. Here in segment number one, we got news and notes of the day. We'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And right now, new customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. And if you win your first $5 bet, you got to go to visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Check it out. I'll tell you more about them a little bit later on in the show. I do want to start out with a positive, though. Want to shout out C-Los, Raider C-Los from Sacramento. He actually sent in a text, said, "Hey, Q, Raider C-Los from Sacramento, California. Want to say my daughter and I listen to your show. Think you're doing a great job covering our Raiders. It's been another hectic season, but we're always looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. Go Raiders. Would you please send a birthday shout out to my daughter, Gabby? Thanks, Q." That's again from Raider C-Los from Sacramento. I think that's awesome. I really do. And I like to start the show like that. And I know some people just want to get right into it and do Raiders, and that's what we're here for, no doubt about it. But that's a special moment right there, right? When Raider C-Los and his daughter Gabby can listen to the show together and share that moment together, whether it's a 10-minute car ride, 15-minute car ride, or they listen to the whole show. I think that's awesome. And happy birthday, Gabby. I hope you celebrate it and have a great time. I'm sure that you will. And maybe the Raiders will get a victory this upcoming Sunday for you. So if so, then we'll go ahead and shout you out, and that means you just got to call in next week. So that's the deal. Happy birthday, Gabby. But if the Raiders win on Sunday versus the Bengals, I'm going to need a call or a text from you talking about how you celebrated your birthday and what you thought about the win. All right? Deal? Sounds good. Deal. And you can't talk back right now. You're listening. You're like, wait, hold on. I didn't agree to that. It's all good. We do appreciate you. And Raider C-Los, thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate that. So let's go ahead and jump into some Raiders conversation. I mentioned on Tuesday's show, I was going to be talking with Tony Pauline, sportskeeda.com. He's a longtime NFL insider and wasn't too sure exactly where the conversation was going to go. And I'll tell you, to be 100% honest, didn't think the interview was as good as I should have made it. And that's on me. That's a me thing. There was a couple areas that I wanted to go that I never quite addressed. But I did have Raider Izzy reach out to me and wanted me to ask him a certain question about the Raiders free agents that they have on defense, because there's a lot of guys on defense right now that they have that could be free agents, could be playing somewhere else in 2025. So I actually start out, and this is just going to be a quick little 2 or 3 minute chunk from my guy, Tony Pauline, that I talked to on Tuesday on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920. So we started out with Raider Izzy's question about the Raiders hesitant to re-sign their own guys defensively. We also talk about just free agents outside of the building and also bring up Tom Brady. So again, just a quick 3 minute chunk of what we had to say and what I talked about with Tony Pauline on my radio show on Tuesday. The Raiders have a lot of free agents. One, my buddy actually sent me a text and wanted me to ask you this question, what you thought, from your point of view. They have a lot of free agents, particularly on the defensive side of things. Malcolm Koonce, Robert Spillane, Divine Diablo, Nate Hobbs, Marcus Epps, Trayvon Merrick. All these guys are in their contract year. Do you think because of the lack of success that they've had this season, it would make Tom Telesco hesitate to give a couple of these guys extensions? How do you think that'll work out with their free agency?
Well, listen, money talks, right? And guys are going to go in this day and age where they can get the most money, they get the most guaranteed money. But, there's an aura around the Raiders. You look at Max Crosby, and I wrote an article last week about the Raiders, and Max Crosby is probably the biggest chip that that team can trade to bring in extra picks. But Max Crosby really wants to be a Raider. He has that aura of that franchise. He's gravitated and grasped the aura of the franchise. So if you get some of those guys who really want to, play for the Raiders and really want to be Raiders, it'll be much easier to try and extend the soon-to-be free agents.
This organization is one that I've said I feel like is a destination that a lot of people are going to want to go for one reason or the other, including playing for Antonio Pierce. I think a lot of players around the league really like him and gravitate to him. Do you see that as a really good destination? As I feel like that the Raiders are going to have a lot of free agency money next season as well.
It depends on the type of player. Antonio Pierce isn't a coach for every type of player. He's a no-nonsense type of guy. He tells it the way it is or the way he sees it. That doesn't always sit well with a lot of players. It has sat well with a guy like Max Crosby and that type of player. So I think there will be certain types of players who like that old-school type of mentality that will be gravitating towards, the Raiders. But again, players are going to want to win. So if they can get that quarterback situation figured out, whether it be in free agency, whether it be in the draft last year. I know they wanted Michael Penix last year, and they lost out on him in the draft. I think that's going to be a big X factor as well.
When you talk to people around the league, kind of what is their overall feeling of what they see, again, from afar? I mean, I know we're here every day, but from afar, what do they see from the team, especially now with Tom Brady being part of ownership as well?
Well, I mean, the Brady factor is nice, but you don't know yet because he was a great quarterback. It doesn't mean that he's going to be great, in the personnel department or behind the desk. The thing is they need more talent, especially in offense. I mean, they need to upgrade the talent. I think Tom Telesco thought that a lot of people were overrating. That's what I was told, and I put that in the article. People on the outside were overrating the talent. They have a lot of good players on defense, but they really need to upgrade that offense. Again, I sound redundant. And I'm sorry about this.
No, it's all good.
The quarterback position and the offensive line. A few receivers would help as well.
There was a quick, 3 minutes. We only talked about 10 to 15 minutes at the max. He had some good stuff, kind of short with some of his answers. So, the interview wasn't as good as normal. I don't think it was really up to my standards, but that's just me. I'm a little bit harder on myself than I probably should be, but that's okay. I think I probably could have done a little bit better job with it. But, again, you kind of get the gist of where he was coming from with those answers. But to go into Raider Izzy's question, I thought it was a really good one. Malcolm Kuntz, he's out for the season. He's a free agent. Robert Spillane, obviously we know he's been a big addition. He's a free agent upcoming. Divine Diablo, upcoming free agent. Nate Hobbs, know how big he's been. Marcus Epps, he's out for the season. He's an upcoming free agent. Trayvon Merrick, right? He's an upcoming free agent. So there's a handful of guys just on the defense alone that Tom Telesco has to make a decision about. And if he was hesitant, as you heard Tony Pauline say that, he felt like the roster was a little bit overrated. If he doesn't think that those players are as good as maybe me and you think they are, maybe he won't re-sign them, and bring them back in 2025. Maybe he'll sit there and wait and see what he can do on the outside. They're going to have a lot of free agency money. Maybe he doesn't look at those guys as guys that they can, really move forward with and win with. I think on defense, it would really help, especially if Patrick Graham is the defensive coordinator, because they know exactly what they're doing. Are any of those guys superstars? No, not at all. But they're key players as far as I'm concerned, especially at Nate Hobbs. Obviously, Robert Spillane's done some really good things. Even Divine Diablo, even though I had questions about him when he was out, you saw what he was able to bring to the table and how important he is, because when he was out, like I said, there was a big gap at that linebacker spot. And then when he came back, you saw, okay, wow, yeah, Divine does need to be in there. So we'll see what happens. I thought, again, it was a really good question from Raider Izzy. That's why I wanted to make sure to pass it along and also pass the answer along. Just a couple minutes of my conversation I had with Tony Pauline on my radio show on Tuesday. We'll be talking to head coach Antonio Pierce later on this morning at 11 o'clock. As a matter of fact, we'll meet with him at the Intermountain Health Performance Center as the Raiders officially turn the page to the Cincinnati Bengals. Week 9, their last game before they have a bye. They'll be able to kind of rest and lick their wounds, get a little bit healed up and everything, and get ready for the second half. And I say second half, that's in theory, of the upcoming season, because they've already played 9 games and they only have 8 games left to go. But it's about in the middle, as close as possible, which is very different for the Raiders and their bye weeks. Usually they either get them really early in the season or they get them really late in the season. What was it last year? After week 13, right? So that's a tough road to hoe right there, right? If you go 13 weeks of consistent play, and then all of a sudden you have a bye, and then you finish off the season with the last 4 games. So the Raiders, they go and they play 9 games, then they have a bye, then they finish off with 8. That's just about where you want it to be, and that's about as middle as you can get, especially when you're only playing in 17 games. So that's what I got for you. Again, head coach Antonio Pierce, we'll talk to him at 11. Practice, the window will be open for us to be out there from 11:40 to 11:55. It's just really the stretching period. Then the locker room from 1:30 to 2:15, but I won't be there in the locker room because my radio show starts at 2, and obviously I got to get ready for it. So I won't be able to be there. But later on this week, I believe on Friday, I'll have an opportunity to go into the locker room before they take off on their flight to Cincinnati and take on the Bengals. Coming up in segment number 2, AP's got to get his guys. And I say AP's got to get his guys because I don't think that we should judge him until he actually has those guys in place and really could put his plan forward, which is something that I think has been really sorely missing in 2024. I'll explain coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of our great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, which is Bilt Rewards. And listen up, renters, all renters out there. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? Well, it's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent every month. Pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to, jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes. Redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Right now, earn points by paying rent right now when you go to jointbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use your URL so they know that we sent you. Join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into the conversation by talking about the record. Obviously, the Raiders are 2-6. I talk about evaluation season. Been talking about that for a couple weeks. But Antonio Pierce is a guy that I've been very adamant that he's the right guy for the job. I believe he should be the head coach. I believe that he should not be one and done like we've seen the Raiders do in the past and other organizations do in the past. I just don't think that's a good way to conduct business. I don't think that's a good way to operate. I don't think that you can ever really form something and create something if you consistently have that turnover. And I get it. Sometimes it gets so bad that you got to have that turnover. But, I look back at this team and the way that it's constructed. And, we talked on Tuesday about the way that they wanted to win games and the way that, obviously it didn't come to fruition, right? The defense hasn't been everything that we thought it was going to be, or at least everything I thought it was going to be. It hasn't been that. Also, the run game hasn't been what Antonio Pierce and company were hoping it was going to be, and it's just not. The offensive line has been in shambles, right? It's been a lot of different players put into different positions and hoping that it works, and it hasn't. And we know the quarterback play has been erratic at best, right? And so you start to look at what the Raiders need as a team moving forward. And, it's funny, I had a texter text into my radio show on Tuesday and said, Q, AP is dealing with the aftermath of Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, what they decided to undo with the Raiders. And he was talking about the quarterback position, and regardless what you thought about Derek Carr, obviously you know that he was a quarterback that, was stable. But he wasn't a big question mark. You knew exactly what you were going to get from Derek Carr. Obviously, when Devontae Adams first arrived, you had an elite wide receiver. You had a really good slot receiver in Hunter Renfrow. Obviously, that went bad as soon as Josh McDaniels showed up. That relationship soured quickly. Right, obviously Josh Jacobs at the running back position, really an upper echelon running back. He's actually second in the league right now as far as rushing yards after contact, only to Derrick Henry. So that lets you know what he's doing. And I get it that Tom Telesco and company didn't want to pay him $14 million or whatever the case may be, didn't want to pay him that money this year for one reason or the other. But we all know he was an upper echelon back, and they don't have that right now. Offensive line, there's so many different things that we can go up and down the line and talk about. And so this team, in my opinion, especially with all the injuries that they dealt with early on, never really had the opportunity to be built in the image and the style that Antonio Pierce was looking for. Does that clear him of all wrongdoings? No, not at all. Does he still need to improve as a head coach? Does he still need to make better in-game decisions? Absolutely. All that is true, right? I'm not trying to say that he gets a mulligan year. There's no such thing like that in the NFL. And look, the Raiders at the end of the year might decide that they've seen enough and they're ready to move on. Tom Brady might say, yeah, not for me, right? And that's not the direction we need to go. I'm not saying, I'm just talking, this is just my opinion on what I believe this team needs to do moving forward. I think Antonio Pierce needs to get his opportunity to get his quarterback. We know his quarterback was Jaden Daniels, and obviously the Raiders weren't able to get him. He wasn't going to be able to get up to the number 2 spot, even though he tried everything he could to get Tom Telesco to go up there. And Tom tried to get there, but there was no way Washington was coming off him, right? So they like Jaden Daniels. They like Michael Penix. They weren't able to get either one of those guys. Michael Penix goes to Atlanta, number 8. I don't think anybody saw that coming. There's a couple people in Atlanta that were like, actually, yeah, I did have a clue that was going to happen. But for the most part, that was a big shock that Michael Penix went number 8 overall. They don't have a dominant back. Alexander Mattison is supposed to be a really good number 2. He's supposed to be a really good complement. Zamir White was supposed to be able to take over that role, and he hasn't been able to do it. Whether it's the blocking scheme, the way that they're trying to run the ball, or maybe he's just not built like that, right? He had a really good 4-game stretch at the end of 2023 that has not translated in 2024. The offensive line, Colton Miller, the staple of it, that's the sturdy left tackle, hasn't been the sturdy left tackle. It looks like JPJ is better at the center position. Okay, so now you've got to go out there and address the 2 guard positions, right? Is Dylan Parham going to come back and actually be that guy, right? Is Jordan Meredith going to have a bigger role moving forward? DJ Glaze looks like he's pretty comfortable at that right tackle spot. What does that mean for Thayer Munford? Does he slide over to the left tackle spot and they move on from Colton Miller? Like, I don't know. You know, I'm just throwing these out there. But those are obviously issues that they have moving forward. So I believe the Raiders need that legit quarterback. They need to be able to dip into the draft and go get their guy. No matter what, that's got to be priority number 1 in the offseason. They've got to get that difference-making running back, a guy who you know is a dude that can carry the load, right? Playmaker on defense. And, you know, it's funny when I say that. People are like, well, what about Max Q? Max is fantastic. I've said it so many times. I never question his effort. I never question what he's going to do because I feel like you're going to get everything you can out of Max Crosby each and every time that he's on the grass. But they also need a dude that makes plays when your team needs it the most. And my perfect example of that is, let's go back to Monday Night Football. Pittsburgh Steelers, TJ Watt, right? He gets the trifecta all in one play. And it's funny that it happened against Jermaine Illuminor. He gets around Illuminor, he sacks Daniel Jones, he strip sacks Daniel Jones, and he recovers the fumble all in the same play. Game, set, match. The Giants were driving, had an opportunity to get down the field, score a touchdown, and go for 2. He didn't let that happen. Right? Okay, you want more evidence to TJ Watt? How about going back when the Raiders played the Steelers? He didn't get any sacks. The offensive line did a good job, but you know what kind of impact he made? Punched the ball out at the 1-yard line on Amir Abdullah, caused a fumble, didn't allow him to score. Punched the ball out on Dylan Lobby, another fumble, another recovery for the Steelers. Those are impact plays. The Raiders need that guy, whether it's another guy on the defensive line. Malcolm Kuntz might have been able to be that guy. That's actually who I was expecting to be that guy. I thought he was going to have just a stellar season with Christian Wilkins in the middle and Max Crosby on the other outside. Thought all the attention was going to be on those 2 dudes and Malcolm Kuntz was going to be able to eat. Unfortunately, he never made it to the regular season. He's out for the season. So maybe it's as simple as bringing him back and he can help be that guy. Maybe it's a ball hawking safety, a ball hawking corner, someone I thought like Jack Jones was going to be. I thought by this time, 8 games into the season, Jack Jones would have at least 2 or 3 interceptions. Not saying they all got to be pick sixes, but I thought he'd have at least 2 or 3 interceptions based off what we saw last season. That's not happening. It hasn't happened. So, again, you just can't, clear everything that's happened. There's been some bad in-game coaching decisions, right? Whether that's lack of help from their, in-game manager, clock management, situational football guy, right? They've got plenty of different coaches on the staff. They got plenty of help along the staff. They've got to be able to come together. I think that, as much as we talk about Getsy, and I don't want to point the finger at him, I do think that they need an innovative mind when it comes to the OC position. And look, the thing about it is AP wanted Jaden Daniels and AP wanted Cliff Kingsbury. And look at those 2 working together in Washington right now. Obviously, they weren't able to get either one of those guys. I get that. But that's what they need. They need a 1-2 punch where the offensive coordinator is an up-and-coming, sharp offensive mind that can help mold a young quarterback like a Jaden Daniels or whoever they end up getting. If that's Shador, if it's Cam Ward, if it's other, it doesn't matter. Whoever it is has got to be coached up by someone that has a sharp mind and can get the most out of their quarterback. He needs that. I don't think Luke Getsy is that guy. Does that mean that he needs to be fired today? No, not at all. You can move on from him after the bye week. You can move on from him after the season. You can just say, you know what? It didn't work. This is what we dealt with this year because, well, that's what it was, right? I mean, Kingsbury was the first option. Getsy was not. It hasn't worked out with Getsy. Okay. I think we can all live with that and understand that. But I by no means think that means that AP should go right away. I just really don't feel like he's had what he needs to be successful this season. And it did look like it was there. It looked like the blueprint was there early, but then it fell apart. It unraveled really quickly. And that's where the Raiders are right now at 2-6. I know they're going to have at least $108 million in cap space in 2025. That's something that Tom Telesco needs to be able to maximize and do really well. They have at least 8 draft picks, potentially like 9 to 10. So that's something else that Tom Telesco is going to have to really use to his advantage. And everything that I said that they need to have it after you have all that, plus what you're still working with this current team. Again, that's just me. I think that would be the right way to judge if AP could be the head coach moving forward and is good enough to do this job and be that guy, is if he actually has what he needs, his pieces in place moving forward. That's just me. We'll see what they end up doing. Like I said, they might say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. You know, we've seen enough and we don't think this guy can get it done. Again, that's not me saying that. That could be what the organization is saying. I don't know. We'll find out sooner rather than later. I didn't think that we'd be at the halfway point of the season already, but here we are. So you'll find out sooner rather than later. But me personally think that that's the only way you're going to be able to judge if you have the right head coach in place is if you get the right pieces in place to go with them. Like D'Amico Ryans got C.J. Stroud. Gerard Mayo in New England got Drake May. Dan Quinn in Washington got Jaden Daniels. Look at the situation in Chicago with Matt Eberflus. They kept him around and got Caleb Williams, and now they're wondering about him. Right? And I think that there was a lot of questions about Matt Eberflus last year. A lot of folks were saying, yeah, he's on his way out. Right? And then they decided to keep him, and now they don't know. But I think he's had enough sample size to understand, all right, this guy isn't the right guy for the job. Like I said, they were about to fire him last year. There was at no point where they were going to fire AP last year. AP was doing some really good things. But the one thing that he told us when we were at the combine, everyone leading up to the draft process, they said, okay, so what's next, right? What do the Raiders need now? You went and got Christian Wilkins, big-time free agent. You have Devontae. What else? And AP told us in Indianapolis, we need a quarterback. He said 2 letters, QB, need a quarterback. And they weren't able to get one. They got Gardner Minshew, and they got Aiden O'Connell. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that believe Aiden O'Connell are the end-all, be-all. I think that the Raiders need a much better quarterback, one that can compete with Mahomes, one that can compete with Herbert, one that can compete with Bo Nix, what he's doing in Denver. And Denver's successful. Whether you want to give him the credit or not, they got 5 dubs on the season. They're in second place in the AFC West. So the Raiders need a quarterback that can compete with those guys. And I'm not saying just because they go into the draft and get a guy, it's guaranteed to be the right guy. You saw what happened with Bryce Young. You seen what happened with Anthony Richardson. Both those guys have been benched. C.J. Stroud was the best quarterback from that 2023 draft. All right, Will Levis in Tennessee is not very good. I know there's questions about Hendon Hooker, but he hasn't really had an opportunity in Detroit. He's behind Jared Goff, so we'll probably never know about him, at least for a while. So it looks like out of all the quarterbacks that were drafted in that stellar draft class, C.J. Stroud is really the only guy. So the Raiders' job, their task, is to find that guy that could be their guy for not a year, not 2 years, but for the long term. That's what they've got to do. And I think Antonio Pierce should be the right guy moving forward with them to at least show what he can do with the right pieces in place. But what's on your mind? Your calls and texts are next. 707-654-4693. That's coming up next in the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, all new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start out with a text from Kansas Raider. It says, hey, Q, Kansas Raider here. If Tom Brady's going to be picking the next quarterback and possibly the next head coach, what is Tom Telesco's job? If Tom Telesco picked Brandon Staley as the head coach of the Chargers, then okay, let Tom Brady pick the next coach. But I think Tom T did a great job with the draft this year. I mean, the first 3 picks are all starters. When was the last Raiders draft when that happened? I'd have to research myself. Getsy definitely needs to go. We should have copied the Chiefs and ran the shovel pass play inside of Bowers at the goal line. Playmakers have to get the ball when the game is on the line. Thanks, Q. Go Raiders. That's Kansas Raider. Thanks so much for the text. And honestly, I wish I could answer that question. You heard me ask Tony Pauline in the little 3-minute clip that I played in segment number 1, what his role is. Nobody really knows what his role is. It hasn't been defined to me what his role is. I keep hearing reports of he's going to be on the personnel side of things. He's going to help decide who the next quarterback is going to be, potentially the next head coach, like you mentioned, if they do go in another direction. But none of that's been confirmed. None of that's been verified. So I really don't know. I don't know if that's really what's going to happen. I mean, it's wild because he's only a 10% minority owner. And it sounds like he sure has a lot of power for only a 10% minority owner, right? It's pretty wild to me, but we'll see. Again, that's something that at some point maybe we'll get some kind of clarity. Tom Telesco is a veteran GM in the league. He's been around for many, many moons. He got a lot of talent there on the Chargers team. He didn't pick the head coach, right? So I mean that's to his credit. He didn't do that with the head coach. That was elsewhere, and that was others. So I think you have a really good question. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. But thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Apple Valley Raider. He's calling to talk about the Raiders' identity and disagrees with AP that the Raiders don't have an identity currently. Here he is, Apple Valley Raider.
Yo, Q, this is Apple Valley Raider. Man, I was listening to Tuesday's podcast, and I appreciate AP's candidness, saying we don't have an identity. But let's be straight up, we kind of do have an identity. We're just in denial of what it is. Point number 1. Who are our 2 best players on offense? We all know who the answer is. It's Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. Or we could say Brock Bowers or Madison. What does Madison do very well? Catch the ball. What does Brock Bowers do better than any tight end this year? Catch the ball. What does Jacoby Myers do? Catch the ball. See, we have an identity, but we're in denial. We're trying to make our identity something that is not. We can pass. Fling the rock. Pass to develop the run, not run to develop the pass. We don't even have a consistent top-end offensive line. Our best offensive lineman has been called Colton Miller, and we all know he's been struggling this year. So what are we doing? What are we talking about? Let's be straight up. Come on, Q. I think Raider Nation knows what's up. Our identity is we have to pass to run, not run to pass. Let's stop being in denial. Let's stop trying to make our strength something that is not. Our 2 best players, possibly 3, I don't know. It's obviously we got the best tight end in the league right now. I mean, I'm not saying he's the best, but statistically he's the best. Give him the ball. Give Jacoby Myers the ball. And that's it. All right, Q, you have a good one.
Apple Valley, thanks for the call. I do appreciate you. And, yeah, I mean, look, we can all say pass the run, but, is that really going to work? The offensive line being where it's at right now, they don't do a great job of pass blocking. They don't do a great job of run blocking. They just don't do a good job of blocking, period. So, we could say that they got to pass to set up the run, but their passes aren't threatening to anybody. And what I mean by that is they're not threatening to hit the deep shot. Right? They're not. They're all okay. They're going to get the ball in their hands really quickly. So all the defenders are sitting on the short stuff. All right, just going to go ahead, load up the box or sit on the short stuff. And, they're going to get the ball in their hands so quick and we'll be there to make a play. So they do have to establish some kind of run game. I just don't know how they're going to do it. Like you said, maybe they can start passing to set up the run, but I just don't think that defenses really are concerned with the passing game of the Raiders. I don't think that they're concerned with the arm of Gardner Minshew or even Aiden O'Connell when he was in there. It's a small sample size. I just don't think that they're too worried about what the Raiders are doing offensively in the pass game. And, they know that AP wants to run the ball, and that's his identity that he wants to have, and it's just not there currently. So your thoughts in theory make sense, but it just hasn't come to fruition when it looks like that the Raiders have even tried to implement that at times. But thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from North Texas. What up, Q? It's North Texas Raider. I think I have one stat that pretty much sums up the hate Raider Nation has for Luke Getsy. I don't know this for an absolute fact, but we have to lead the league this year using run plays on second and third down and extra long, like over 10 yards. I feel like I want to just pile 50 bags of cement on a blocking sled and tell Getsy to push it 10 yards since he thinks it's so easy. Second and 12, we're going to just hand the ball off to our back and tell him to go run into the offensive line for the 20 millionth time. Thanks, Getsy. I appreciate watching that kind of ball every Sunday. Anyway, Q, I'll stop griping. As always, love what you do for the nation. North Texas Raider out. Thanks so much for the text. And yeah, I don't have the numbers on how many times it's been second and long, third and long, and the Raiders have ran the rock, but I know it's been a lot. To your point, it's been a lot, right? And that's not what the Raiders should be doing. And I know sitting there at Allegiant Stadium on Sunday, seeing multiple plays like that happen, I sat there and thought, what happened? What are they doing? It's got to be something different. And I get it that you're trying to spring a run and think that they don't see it coming, but you've done it so many times that everyone sees it coming. Oh, it's second and 18. They're going to run the ball. And they do for 3 or 4 yards. And that's a whole lot another. Then all of a sudden it's third and 14, and that's not going to get it done. The perfect example of that was that final drive before the half that they had, right? When they had an opportunity to get down the field and potentially score, and they ran the rock, and ran the rock some more. And then, you saw Gardner Minshew throw a pass that went incomplete and stopped the clock. And KC got the ball back with 58 seconds, a timeout as well, and went down the field and got a field goal. Now the only thing that surprised me about that was they only got a field goal out of that. I thought they were actually going to turn that into a touchdown. So, I'm with you. Like I said, I don't know the number. Like you don't know the number, but it is a lot. And that's something that they can't consistently keep doing. Thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Got time for a couple more. This call comes from C Money in Houston. In H-Town, he's calling to talk about the Raiders' offense, in particular what's been missing. Here he is, C Money in Houston.
Hey, Q, what's up? It's C Money from Houston. Got a couple of notes, just basically about the Raiders' offense, really. So we obviously cannot run the rock, right? But I think that's a huge part of any offense is being able to run the ball. So it's not really possible for us to just only pass all game. But one thing that I noticed is a lot of times we get pretty conservative with our passing, and we kind of just are taking what we think are simple routes and, okay, maybe we get 3 or 4 yards and, keep this drive going. But, I'm not a football genius, so correct me if I'm wrong. But what is wrong with every now and then just throwing a bomb? Just throwing an absolute 50-yarder, Trey Tucker, go up there, get it. Maybe it gets picked off, maybe it falls down, maybe it's a huge gain. But setting that tempo and setting that message to the defense that, hey, if you don't back up, if you're going to give me some space, I'm going to air it out. So you better step back. You better put 2 high safeties up there. Maybe you might take somebody out of the box, and then that'll kind of soften up that defense and maybe allow for the run. Maybe, listen, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to learn. But that's my philosophy is, okay, we know this offense is not going to be able to work somebody down the field with these short, deliberate routes, right? So let's just take a gamble. Let's throw that up there. I know Gardner Minshew is not the greatest quarterback of all time, but I think he's a pretty good quarterback. He showed us pretty early on in the season he can pass it around. Let's get back to that. Let's air that sucker out, man. Come on. One more thing. Which I think we're going to take a quarterback in the draft. I hope we take a quarterback in the draft, and hopefully it's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. But we're looking at probably top 7 right now, which leads me to believe that we're probably going to have to trade up pretty far, at least top 2 or 3 to get one of our guys. We might be able to do that, but I think there's also some moves that need to be made at the deadline, so to kind of get some assets so that we could trade up. So I was just asking, who do you think could be traded at this deadline? And one more thing, I think this is the worst that the Chiefs have looked in the past, X amount of years that Patrick Mahomes has been there. And I thought that last year they looked pretty bad. And I thought that, every Super Bowl is earned, so I don't think it's a Mickey Mouse run. But this is the worst they look. Please, this is a message to the rest of the league. Please, 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 please do not let the Chiefs limp into another Super Bowl. Take them out. This is the worst they're going to look in a while, okay? They're not going to be bad forever. So this is your chance. Do not let them win another Super Bowl. Please, please, please. Thank you, Q. Have a great day. I love you.
See Money, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, I mentioned it earlier, right? The deep shot. Have not seen the deep shot. The opposing defenses they don't feel threatened by the Raiders offense. They don't think that they're going to throw the deep ball. Tucker has speed. Turner has speed. But the Raiders don't. They can't protect long enough to let those plays develop. They've thrown a couple of those throughout the course of the year. A couple of them have come through, but they haven't been able to hit the wide receiver in stride where they can score a touchdown. It's just been, okay, here's a 35-yard gain, or here's a 38-yard gain, or here's a 40-yard gain, instead of a 30-yard gain and then boom, another 20 yards on top of that for the run and a touchdown. The one big play that they've had like that is when Minshew just kind of threw it up there, and Brock Bowers went up there and made the play, right? Made the big play, mossed the defensive back, and then turned and took it to the house to score. But that was more Brock Bowers than really a good design. That was Gardner Minshew off his back foot, really just trying to avoid a sack, backpedaling, just threw it and prayed. And his prayer just happened to get answered, right? But that was more Brock Bowers than anything. So, yeah, that's definitely something that they need to do. As far as like players that could be on the move, we saw Cam Robinson, the left tackle from the Jaguars, get traded to the Vikings on Tuesday. So I can see a team calling for Colton Miller. I believe Adam Schefter reported that. He also reported that teams could be interested in Jacoby Myers. We know that, teams called on Jacoby Myers before the season, like the 49ers. I would hope that the Raiders would not move on from him and trade him because they need to have playmakers. Him and Brock Bowers are a really good 1-2 punch as far as I'm concerned. But we saw a wide receiver. We see multiple wide receivers already traded for so far this period leading up to the trade deadline. So Deontay Johnson from the Panthers got traded to the Ravens on Tuesday. We've seen Amari Cooper go from the Browns to the Bills. We've seen obviously Devontae go from the Raiders to the Jets. Seen DeAndre Hopkins go from the Titans to Kansas City. Multiple guys have been on the move. And so I can see teams calling about a Jacoby Myers. I just don't know if the Raiders would be willing to move him. Again, that's something that I'm not breaking this news. That's something that Adam Schefter talked about on Sunday. I actually saw that as I was wrapping up my pregame show from the Torch at Allegiant Stadium. That's when I found that or saw that report from Adam Schefter. So thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. And, of course, the trade deadline's coming up on Tuesday, the 5th. So 1 p.m. Pacific time, all trades have to be into the league office and made official before they and that's when the trade deadline gets wrapped up. So thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. We'll close out with a text from no, we don't do that one. I don't have a name on that one. So we'll text from JT Central Raider. It says, good morning, Q. JT Central Raider here. If you could put on your owner's cap for 10 minutes, what's the first thing you would do? How about getting all your coaches in one office and start cutting the fat? Starting with all those so-called assistants. They are assistants to losing. Boom, gone. O-line coach, gone. OC, gone. Something has to change it quick. Shake it up. Your thoughts, Q. Love your show. It's JT Central Raider. Thanks so much. And, it's funny. I kind of put on my owner's cap in segment number 2 when I talked about keeping Antonio Pierce there and making sure he had what he needs. I would say that the offensive coordinator needs to be replaced, right? And I don't care if you replace him now or you replace him at the end of the season. I think at the end of the season is fine. Or even in the bye week, maybe you move Scott Turner into the offensive play calling position. Whatever the case may be, I think that an innovative offensive coordinator, somebody with some sharp young mind, and obviously has a proven track record at some level to be a really good OC is someone that's needed. The offensive line coach, I just don't know if that scheme is going to work for the Raiders. A lot of times when they try to implement their blocking scheme that he's trying to implement, it just doesn't work. They might just have to go back to the power run game instead of the zone run, the outside zone run. That's not working. There's a lot of different things that are working. So you might have to go through and trim some of the fat. I would like to know how much of influence Marvin Lewis is having on Antonio Pierce, because I thought he was going to be someone that was going to be a major contributor along that coaching staff, Joe Philbin as well. And so far, I don't know that. So I would like to get the answers to that before I know what to do with them, if that makes sense. And there's a lot. It's like 29 coaches on the staff. So I'm sure that there's a few that may not be contributing at the level that they need to. And it's time to, all right, well, let's just move on from these guys, but keep these core dudes in place, right? Antonio Pierce Patrick Graham, Rob Leonard, defensive line coach. I think he's so important. Caldwell, linebackers coach. He's got a lot of skill set. I think he's a really good coach. The running back coach may need to, maybe Cadillac Williams isn't cutting it. I'm not too sure, right? Maybe they need to go and get another running back coach. Obviously, that'll be for another day, not this year. It'll have to be in the offseason, but that could be an area that they address. So I guess that's the best way I can answer that question as of right now. But thank you so much for it, JT Central Raider. Do appreciate you. Appreciate all the feedback that we get here on the daily on the Locked On Raider podcast. Voicemail line 707-654-4693. Coming up tomorrow, it's on to the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll have the crossover edition. So we'll talk all things Bengals. We'll talk all things Raiders, storylines offensively and defensively for both, and path to victory, what the Raiders and what the Bengals need to do to win the game coming up on Sunday. So that'll come up on tomorrow's show. And then on Friday, we'll close everything out strong, have more calls, text, news, and notes. And, of course, plenty of conversation as well. Keys to victory, all that good stuff here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.